This is Debbie Reynolds and Pamela Gupta, and this is the Cybersecurity and Data Privacy Fix. So this is actually season 2. We took a summer hiatus, but we're back, and I'm happy to see Pamela again. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah. So while we were on our break, so many things happened, but this is very timely. So in the news recently, we saw that T-Mobile had a data breach, and I think right now they're calling it a unauthorized access. They're calling it unauthorized access, not really a breach at this point. But they think now, I think the most recent number I saw was 52 million people were impacted. I guess someone on the dark web found a list and were able to validate that this is, a legitimate list of information about T-Mobile customers. So this list had people's last name, date of birth, social security number, driver's license number, and they believe that this information was gathered or collected as a result of people applying for credit or applying for accounts with T-Mobile. So they think actually the impacted number of people may be more, because not everybody who applied for an account actually became a customer, right? So I think that number is going to grow a lot, depending on the people that are actually on that list and sort of what's happening with that. And so, obviously there are a lot of cyber risks that people need to think about. But give me your thoughts about what's happening with T-Mobile on this particular data breach or an unauthorized access, as they're calling it right now.
So call rose by any other name, but the fact is there is impact to customers, right? We're talking about numbers that are moving by the day, which is even worse than a company knowing exactly what was compromised and how it was compromised and what is the exact scope. So the latest numbers I heard, Debbie, is that they got PII, personal identifiable information, of more than 40 million past, present, and potential customers, like you said. So they may not have been existing customers. And what makes it more severe is that 5.3 million customers was confirmed to have been obtained in the hack, right? That's, I don't know, it's a number, right? Now we probably by this time, we are desensitized to what numbers actually, millions of compromised record, what does that mean? Who gets impacted? So we don't need to even go into what was compromised. And I will say that in addition to PII, which is really important information, the impact of a mobile carrier breach in this case, or whatever that term was, the polite way of putting it if it's not a confirmed breach. But the real impact is not only can somebody take your name and social security number and go get a mortgage application, which you could put a freeze on, right? After the traditional response for a company is, we can get a freeze, and then you can, maybe somebody cannot open an account, for example. The implication of a mobile carrier's compromised data is a lot more severe than even what a PII, traditional PII is. And I'll go into that unless you have something you want to add at this point, Debbie.
Not really. Well, I do want to add something. I think one of the dangers here is related to SIM swapping. And I wanted to see if you could kind of explain what SIM swapping is.
Yes, so I think the two things that I want to focus on for this are, one is what you're describing is a SIM locking, and what can people do? What is the implication of a SIM swap attack? Okay. And let's start with that then, which is there are a couple of identifiers for any mobile device, right? And in some cases, in the T-Mobile attack, um, there are unique identifiers on people's phones, which were also compromised. There are two types of identifiers. One is an IMEI number. It's a unique 15-digit number that is unique to a mobile device. Now, this is not PII, right? But this number can be used to identify device, and it can be blacklisted. So if you call your provider and say this number, these are the numbers that were compromised, can you blacklist it? Then the attacker may be able to get you to not be able to use your phone. Okay, they could call customer service and say, well, we are the authorized, that this affected me, and they may not be the right owners, of course. So the rightful owner may be able to be blocked out from using that account, which is not necessarily bad, because then you know your account is being used by somebody, and that's a sure giveaway. And the other is the international mobile subscriber identity, which can be also problematic because they can same thing. They're different, they're unique, and if you the problem with this one is you're not automatically at risk. That's a good thing for a SIM swap attack if your number is floating in the wild. In other words, so if you don't know, it has been, so you would not, in other words, be able to know that this was compromised. But if you know you've been affected, then that's when you would call T-Mobile, right? I think a wise thing to do would be to just reach out to them and say that you are looking to get a different SIM card, for example. So you're not even taking it on their face value on what they have identified, because reality is the fact that the numbers are changing and they don't know the exact scope. And this is not the first time T-Mobile has had an attack. This is, I think, the fifth one in recent years. So clearly shows that there are some systemic issues with the way they are handling their cybersecurity strategy and protection and identifying what data needs to be protected and how.
Right. And also, I guess from a consumer perspective, one thing that makes this unique in my mind is that the information that has been exposed is enough to be able to have someone get a mortgage or something. Maybe all they need to know is your favorite color or something like that. I mean, this is like a lot of base information.
Right. And the other aspect, which I think is really near and dear to my heart, even more than the SIM swap attack possibility, right, is the fact that as a security professional, our standard and our really foundational advice to anyone is to protect your online accounts with multi-factor authentication. For most companies, including, when you shop in Amazon or you go to Google for your Gmail or MFA, multi-factor authentication means a text to your phone. Now, if your phone number is compromised, your phone details are compromised, where they can actually use the information that has been gathered to log into your account, for example, right, to be able to use the mimic and be you, take your phone identity with the SIM swap and with the credential access. That is where things really become extremely high impact. Because if you're getting your information on your phone, your second factor authentication, a text message, SMS message with your two-factor authentication, and it's going to someone else who can carry off, because of this compromise, your identity and your device, then pretty much game over for a lot of two-factor authentication purposes. Now, there are ways to mitigate that. And the easiest one I do want to mention is that instead of using SMS, if companies, for example, Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, they are apps that you install on your phone, right? And if they are sending it to that, and now you know your phone is not with you, right? It's you can go into your account and change your the account, or so it's not going to through an SMS message. It's not going through T-Mobile, for example, in this case. It's going directly to the Authenticator app, and that way you can surpass or mitigate the risk from this.
Yeah. And what do you think is the lesson for other businesses looking at this particular breach? What advice would you give to businesses who are looking at this and saying, you know, T-Mobile is obviously, you know, maybe bigger than, you know, my company. What can I do as a business owner to try to be more secure?
So I think there are some simple steps that I would definitely recommend. For example, I just mentioned that when companies are looking at how would they use two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, that they don't use text services, that they actually have APIs to call into the authenticator apps from the authentication service providers, right? The ones I just mentioned, and there are others. Okay, so that they use go the extra step, right, and make sure that they are for any e-commerce example for company. So that's one thing. The other thing is there's always lessons learned from data breaches, and in this case, the breach actually seems to have happened because they had a backup server that was storing information in clear text, and this was sensitive information such as the ones we just talked about. Now, any client or any person that, you know, any security professional, when they meet with business and they're giving advice on what to do and how to do risk remediation for gaps, etc., the standard response is always, well, we cannot secure everything, right? You have to prioritize for us. And I think that's a key thing that a lot of companies don't take that into account, that you have to have a risk-based approach where you know certain kind of information, whether in this case, like we're talking about, even the IMEI number or the unique number in this case, based on their business model, they want to be able to identify where is PII, and also information which can have a foundational impact on security and how people use security, because people are using phones, SMS messages for getting two-factor authentication information, right? So they need to have an idea of what is a critical piece of information, what is sensitive based on regulation, and what is based on the business model. So that would be the second thing. And the third is, when you know what that information is and you know where it resides, such as in this case, a backup server, you really cannot take partial measures. You want to know what the risks are. So you already know it's these. This is the information. Where all does it sit? And you can't, like I said, the half measure here would be to look at the front end, look at the app, but backups and are a very integral part, and that it is a better target because oftentimes it's not the focus, it's not the sexy thing to do in securing, right? That's where, in this case, text data is the in clear text was the issue, what caused the breach to happen.
I think you hit on a really valid and important point where a lot of times companies are thinking about kind of the most valuable data in terms of how they run their business. And so something that's like a backup or something that was, legacy data may not have as much business value in the moment, right, for the business and those things to be a liability, especially we see in this case when it's breached or when it's accessed in some way that is not authorized. So I think you're right. I think someone that posted on LinkedIn recently about kind of legacy projects or kind of the tail end of digital transformation. So, everyone's really excited about kind of the new project or the new thing that they're implementing. But when you're trying to decommission something or roll it off the system or, trying to figure out what you should keep and what you shouldn't keep, a lot of times that data may not be secured in the same way. And it may not
Right.
have the focus, and there may not be the budget, right, to be able to really focus there. So I think, to me, the lesson is, not all data is, people think some people say data is like the new gold or whatever. Not all data is a asset. Data that is laying around that you don't need, that doesn't have lower business value, and may create like a higher risk if it's breached. It's actually a liability.
Yeah, I agree. So all data is not gold. Some data may be platinum, right? In this case, you have to know what that is, because all regulated data, let's say it's gold, but all business impact data, such as these unique identifiers, that's platinum for a telecom company, a provider of mobile services. So let's
Exactly.
that for what it is and have that awareness. And the last thing I would say is, what I always talk about, not just looking at something a single purpose, but also the entire ecosystem. So it's not just T-Mobile that has an impact. It's all these financial institutions, all e-commerce, all these companies that rely on this as their base, really, for doing multi-factor authentication. They are impacted, right? So this is a far-reaching problem. And that's where, even if T-Mobile didn't have the right security strategy, it's really the people who are leveraging them, especially the ones who are big enough to leverage them, where they can put in the right kind of pressures to make sure that they have the assurance that they are doing the right thing. It's always a two-way street.
Yeah, because like you said, the impacts can be, to the life of the individual, regardless of kind of what product or service that they're using, or, if they're applying for benefits somewhere, this may impact them in a lot of different ways. So it's kind of far reaching, as you say. And I think we're just going to see how things play out with this particular thing. I'm always interested to see when these incidents happen, the communication that comes out from the corporation. And so I'll be continuing to watch that as well.
Yes, as we should all, because this is changing. So we do want to be making sure that we're monitoring what is the latest find, for example.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Pamela. This was a great session, and happy we can talk about this, but I think this is just going to be an ongoing thing. We'll see what the numbers end up to be in a few months to see how things play out in this particular incident.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. All right.